Díagríomh go léir cóide agus Sáfáilte Road. Welcome to be my guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lear Media TV, supporting the Samaritans, Limerick and Tipperary, Clare's Wish Foundation in Limerick, and Deel Animal Rescue in West Limerick. And my lovely guest today is Dr. Sinéad Kane from Cork. Hello, Sinead. How are
Hi,
you?
thanks so much for having me on your show today. I'm delighted to meet you, and
It's an
thanks so much for wanting to hear my story.
It's an absolute privilege. You have no idea how inspirational your story is. For the listeners, Dr. Sinead has done 2 PhDs, as if one isn't enough. And I know how difficult the process of getting one PhD is. But Dr. Sinead Kane has done 2 of them, and both as a partially sighted person, which I'm sure Sinead must have had its own challenges as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
well,
how difficult was that, the process?
Well, like you say, doing a PhD is quite a difficult task. One of my PhDs is an academic PhD, and then the other one is actually an honorary doctorate. I suppose the reason why I got an honorary doctorate is for the amount of community work and advocacy work in terms of rights that I do for people with disabilities. So the academic PhD is in relation to a secondary school teacher's duty of care inside and outside of school regarding bullying. And then the honorary PhD, as I say, that was given to me. The academic was given by DCU, and the honorary was given by NUI, National University of Ireland. So I got the honorary one in October 2017, and then I got my academic one in December 2017, January 2018. You know yourself, when you do your Viva, you're not fully sure what date.
I have now, but you don't get it for months later.
Yeah. So, and I suppose, just very briefly, because a PhD is 90,000 words, and I'm sure your listeners don't want to be bored by me talking about 90,000 words. But to try and bring it out with simplest form, what I looked at was a qualitative PhD. So I interviewed 29 secondary school teachers. From what I remember, was 18 of them was female and 11 of them were male. And I looked at kind of 4 factors. So I looked at duty of care, I looked at empathy, I looked at institutional stressors such as curriculum burden, and then law and policy. And I suppose what I found very much was that we really do have to instill a culture of care into our schools to try and prevent bullying. I saw that teachers who have an expansive duty of care, they're more likely to want to prevent and intervene in bullying. And teachers also who display higher levels of empathy, they again will want to intervene and prevent bullying. Some of the secondary school teachers noted during their interviews that they found it difficult to decide actually what was bullying. So they knew that a definition of bullying existed in their school policy, but they couldn't cite it off, which I suppose in some ways some people might find that alarming. There was 1 or 2 teachers who said that they knew a policy existed, but they didn't know what was in it. So when I was asking them about what was their duty inside a school and outside a school, some of them just seemed very vague on it. Some teachers would discuss that, how they felt that in terms of empathy, that the same cars would have gone at 4 p.m. each day from the school gates, and the same cars would be staying behind. So kind of emphasizing how some teachers view it as a vocation and how some teachers view it as just a paid job.
Yeah.
And then some of them were very vocal about law and policy, that they don't want a specific anti-bullying law. They felt that it would be too much of a burden, adding on already extra stresses that they have to cope with. Some teachers felt that there's a lot of admin added with the bullying, and that on top of rushing from class to class. And like I say, some teachers were saying that they felt that, say, an example would be two children coming from sixth class into first year, and one of those children not wanting to be best friends with the girl anymore, and the teacher not knowing, right, do I force these two children to be friends when one wants to be friends and the other one doesn't, and that child that doesn't want to be friends is just excluding and ignoring the girl. Can you force two children to be friends who just don't want to be friends? And I suppose that teacher then was answering his and her own question by saying that you can't force children to be friends if they don't want to, but you have to have a culture of respect as well.
Exactly. You can create the environment in which both children, they may not ever be friends, but they can be what's the word I'm looking for? They can be kind to each other. They can be respectful of the other child, and say hello to them and sit with them and be nice to them. But that doesn't mean that they have to be friends with them outside of school. But I think it's important, don't you, to have the correct environment set up in a school. And I personally feel that empathy classes are something that should be taught in all schools. I think it should be compulsory in all schools, that you bring up the subject of empathy with children, because they mightn't be learning it at home. They might come from very tolerant homes in some cases. So the only way they're going to understand empathy is in school.
Mm-hmm. And some teachers in my PhD during the interviews were commenting like about the culture of schools, and how if maybe in some schools the culture can be very maybe masculine or very sports focused.
Yeah.
And obviously if you're different in terms of sexuality and you're not very sports focused, then that in itself can cause a problem without the school actually fully acknowledging that that is a problem when in that particular county. It might be deemed a very GAA focused county, and where all, say, males are expected to get on a certain team, and so just elements like that. So overall the PhD was extremely interesting. It kind of went down a bit of a route where originally I was planning on going to Boston to look at the anti-bullying law that had been implemented in Boston, to see could we implement that anti-bullying law here in Ireland, because there was a girl, Phoebe Prince in Boston, who ended up committing suicide and on foot of her death. It was deemed that the school, that an anti-bullying law needed to be brought in, because the school had a duty of care outside of school, because the bullying was being impactful outside of school. I was looking at that law to see could we implement that here. And I suppose even though I didn't end up going to Boston for a case study, in those kind of factors, you kind of realize it's not as simple to say, okay, can we just transfer that law from there to here? Because you have to look at populations of society, how society is organised there compared to here in Ireland, etc. So my PhD in the end ended up being very more education focused with the legal element.
You
So
would have liked it to have been more legal, I would imagine.
yeah, I think so. I suppose like this is the thing about always learning. Like my background is qualified solicitor and certified mediator, so I have all those legal skills. And but as I was going along, I went into this PhD very much law focused, and then I came out with a PhD that was more education focused than law focused. And I suppose by doing that, I got to learn about the world of schools, the world of how teachers view their vocation, and you kind of, as opposed to looking at laws and like, okay, law, black, white, type of scenario. So yeah, it was educational for me. And I think no matter how much qualifications any of us have, we can always learn.
Did you always want, did you experience bullying yourself?
Yeah, so
I mean, only once ever in school, and my mum heard about it. Not from me, she heard about it from another girl who told her mother, who told my mother, and my mother went down and put in a stop to it. But it to the school, and the teachers knew exactly who was involved. I wouldn't tell, but they knew exactly. But you know, I think it has to be nipped in the bud. But I also think that they pick on people that they think are vulnerable. Bullies do. How
yeah,
did it
well,
manage for you?
from my research and just from my own personal experience, I think that anybody can be bullied, but it's when you're different in
Yeah,
some way. And I think sometimes, even if you're confident, sometimes people just want to destroy your confidence. And if they see any bit of a weakness there, then that they've got at your confidence, then that then is the motive then to try and take down your confidence. So I suppose when I was younger, like I at 4 years of age, I discovered I was visually impaired. My parents told me, and they were trying to instill in me that the greatest gift I could give myself is self-acceptance. That was all fine until I went to school, and then when I went to school at around ages 6 and 7, I started realizing that I was different. And I kind of started realizing, okay, this whole concept of being different is a good thing, which was taught me. I started realizing, okay, well, actually being different isn't a good thing because people are staring at me. Like just people don't want to be around me. It's like nearly as if like my disability is contagious, that they didn't want to be around me. I started realizing that I was the only person wearing black shaded sunglasses in the playground. I was the only person with a small white symbol stick in class. I was the only person who'd be walking up and down to see what was on the blackboard. And so all of those different things I picked up on, and then the other students were picking up on them as well. And then just ended up going from that then to a situation where just the kids just, it kind of first started off with people putting out their foot to try and trip me, and then I'd fall over and everybody would laugh. And then it would kind of went from that then to when I'd be on the ground, then somebody would kick me, and then it went from that then to just kind of people saying, oh well, is she bleeding? Oh, if she's not, let's see who can be the winner of the game, and draw blood and like, and so I end up used to get hit and all of that. And I suppose obviously you don't want to be going to school for that. You don't want to be going to school to be having bruises. So I decided then, okay, I wasn't going to school. And then so all the time I'd be pretending that I'd be feeling sick, and then actually then the anxiety of going to school would actually be causing me to be sick. And so then I ended up quite unwell, and so then I didn't go to school. And then I suppose it was a long road then, because for me, like, the bullying didn't stop in primary school. Then in secondary school, it continued. In secondary school, it wasn't really physical at all. It was just very much
Emotion.
isolating, and very much kind of comments of like snide comments, or people wouldn't talk to you, or people wouldn't sit beside you, or like, say now, if we were all in the computers class, and if I needed help with the computer, and if I asked the person beside me, say if I couldn't see the screen because the computers in the computer class didn't have the Zoom text magnification that I needed, and I'd ask the person beside me, oh, what does that say? They'd just sit there and they'd ignore me. So it was that type of thing where I wasn't being able to learn through observation. Like, fully sighted people learn through observation by looking at things. But obviously, if I was trying to look at a computer screen and I couldn't see it. So then it come fifth year, then the bullying was having a big impact on my life, that I ended up going out of school in fifth year, and I was out for a good number of months. And basically, I more or less missed all of fifth year. And then at the same time, then I was trying to fight for my rights, to be getting large printed handouts in school, and to be getting just my educational rights, and had to get solicitors involved with that to try and help with that. And so obviously that was stressful as well. And then so my fifth year and leaving cert year were very, very difficult. And I remember there was very low moments, and just not wanting to maybe go on. And I suppose that's where you just really need to try and be resilient and bounce back.
I think, that it's something that you, when you're bullied as a child, no matter how you try to avoid it, you want to be a very strong person to come through it unscathed, because it leaves a residue in some way that I think that you become obvious to people who are that way inclined. They see the person that is easily bullied. It leaves an emotional scar that becomes very transparent to other bullies in life, whether it's emotional bullies or people who bully you by exclusion. It's interesting you talk about bullying by exclusion, because that is probably even worse than physical bullying, because you can get over the bruises, but it's the feeling of not being quite good enough, not being part of the group, not being accepted, always on the outside looking in at everyone else apparently enjoying life, whether they are or not. And I wonder how much of it is part of our own. I mean, because I've been excluded on so many things, and I find the exclusion the hardest, than the one occasion that I was physically bullied in school. I think the emotional effect it has on a person to be excluded, to not be quite accepted, to be always different and not quite part of the group. I think that's a worse form of bullying.
Well, like, for me, the impact of bullying, and even research does show this through having learned it through my PhD, that bullying does have long-term consequences for those who are bullied. And I know this from myself, because I would find trust very difficult all throughout my life. I do, like,
Yeah,
it would take me a long, long time to trust people.
yeah.
It takes me a long time, say, to build friendships with people. And yeah, so that is what I've learned. And even having partners in my life, and different relationships, like, that has kind of suffered as well. So for me, just because my school days are over, this issue of trust still happens with me in trying to form relationships or form friendships with people. And yeah, that is quite difficult. I think as well, though, people with disabilities who had a better experience than me, who were never bullied in school, even them in their adult life, they can be excluded as well, because I think a lot of people with disabilities, because they're different, whether you were bullied or not bullied, do get excluded in adult life, and get rejected.
And I also think that people, with a disability or being excluded or just having a disability can also have another effect. It can also make you super confident and super, what's the word I'm looking for, but super effective in everything you do. I have a cousin who has polio, and and from the very, very youngest age, she was always encouraged to be confident and to not be embarrassed or not to be shy and to go out. And I always, growing up, envied her so much, because she was the confident one. She was the one that my mother really could sit and talk to more than me. My mother she was very much like my mom in ways. And she was the person that you would look at and think she is going to succeed in life, because what she lacks in being able to walk without calipers at the time, she makes up in intelligence and confidence, and I used to envy her, because even though I wasn't physically disabled in any way, thank God, I was disabled in the sense that I wasn't very good at mixing with people in groups. And that was because I was never one of the cool girls in school. There was always these gangs or these groups, and they always played sports. I was a dancer, and I was into the arts and things like that. And when you're into the arts, you're outside everything, really, because you're neither sporty or academic, you're arty. And I just think that you stand out like a sore thumb, and you'd almost prefer to be the sports person or the academic, just to belong, just to be part of the group.
The advice that I would give to any person who is suffering bullying, and I know it might sound easier said than done, but like, if I was to go back to my childhood years, it'd be like to try and focus your energy not on what the bullies think of you, or not focus your energy on trying to change yourself to please them, because it really does all come down to energy, like our physical, mental and spiritual energy. So rather than focusing your energy on the bullies or trying to change yourself, focusing on developing new skills, or focusing on trying to become an entrepreneur, focusing on something that is going to build your character, your income later in life. So obviously, if you're feeling just I suppose self-esteem is down because being bullied, try and focus your energy into being creative, whether that's painting, or whether that's mindfulness, or whether that's developing a skill through playing a guitar, or trying to solve a problem and become an entrepreneur. That you never know, that business then might make you a lot of money in the future. Because I think that when you become an entrepreneur, it kind of sets you up for life. It helps you to learn skills which you will need later on in life. So I think it's really, what I'm trying to say in a very long-winded way, is about investing into yourself and saying to yourself, okay, well, rather than sitting in my bedroom now all evening worrying about, okay, what these girls are going to be saying about me in school tomorrow. I'm not going to sit all evening worrying about that. I'm going to sit and I'm going to read a business book and figure out how am I going to make a lot of money in my 20s to fund my college. And I think, again, that's easier said than done, because we live in this world where everybody wants to look the same as all these reality stars that are on Instagram. But I suppose the ironic thing of it all is everybody wants to look the same like their reality stars, but by getting a job, you have to be different.
Yeah.
And the employer is going to be asking you, well, what's your USP? And so that's why learning about yourself from a very young age, learning about what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, what you're weak at, what you need to build on, and what skills. And if you can try and figure out in your teenage years where you want to be going in your 20s or 30s, to me, it's good, because you can start investing into those areas of skills. So that would be just this, a small bit of advice that I give a person: invest your energy and focus into those areas. And again, as well, like, I was never involved in sport as a child, and I only took up running at age 30, and that has really built my confidence. And again, so try and develop your mindset and your energy maybe towards sport if you feel that, because that is something that has helped me. And I suppose I wish that more facilities would have been made available for me to do sport when I was younger, because maybe then the bullying mightn't have had such an impact and a detrimental effect on me as what it had. And maybe I wouldn't have been out of all of school, all of fifth year, etc.
You'd have been involved, Sinead, with people who were equally, say, visually impaired, who were doing something that you had a shared interest in. I think there's nothing worse than being the only person who has or to be standing out in a group of girls, or a group of in a co-ed school where everyone is trying to fit in and belong and be part of the group, but you're different either because you're visually impaired or because your interests have nothing to do with what everyone in the gang wants to be interested in, or because you're just somebody who likes to plow your own furrow and follow your own you're a leader rather than a follower, or you don't like to follow the crowd, and therefore you stand out. But if you had the sport or the running when you were in school, you wouldn't have felt so isolated, probably.
Well, I think as well, like, the difference with me is, though, the level that I have actually achieved in sport is in able-bodied sport as opposed to disabled sport. So, like, what I'm kind of saying is, yes, have opened doors to me in disabled sport back when I was younger, but more so, like, and I advocate a lot for this, that schools and communities need to make their sports accessible for disabled people in able-bodied sport. And if that disabled person is showing an ability that they can compete, then I suppose things, now it's not going to work for all sports, but measures should be put into place. So, like, I suppose a lot of about ableism talks about how society is all set up for able-bodied, whereas and it kind of more sees the disabled person as the problem, whereas, like, ableism is all about, well, it's more the barriers of society that exist. So, like, I suppose in my school, yes, have sports games that facilitate people who are able-bodied, but also have sports games where it's not just where the person with a disability can be included in some way. So, for example, every single Monday they might have had badminton on in my P class. Now, badminton wasn't going to fully suit me, so therefore, to like, maybe not every single Monday should they have been playing badminton. They should have kind of contacted a visually impaired organization and said, okay, well, how can we have this girl in PE class integrating with fully sighted girls, because a lot of friendships are made through sport.
Yeah.
And I think if you're just going to say, oh, she's disabled and we'll just send her off to the disabled sport people, then that isn't setting that person up for real world, because when they're older, when they're in a job, they need to be able to interact with able-bodied people. So I think that you need to try and integrate a person with a disability as much as you can from an early age, whether it's in sport, in school, or in the community.
It doesn't take very much, because I mean, I've
takes
taught,
about being creative, creative minds.
I mean, I've taught Irish dancing, and I've taught children with special needs, and I've taught speech and drama at Brothers of Charity with adults with special needs, and the enthusiasm with which they take on and they embrace and you know that there's no reason in the world why any of them couldn't work or couldn't perform with an able-bodied or somebody who didn't have a mental disability, if you like. Why both couldn't work together? Because certainly when it comes to drama or when it comes to the arts, it's not rocket science. It's a talent. It's much more than an intelligence or an ability to articulate what you've learned. I think the arts is a great way of including people from able-bodied and disabled people together.
Well, I'm a director of Able Vision Ireland, and what that is that people with intellectual disabilities, they're like a media production company. So people with intellectual disabilities, they buddy up with able-bodied people, and they go around and they make films and they be part of film festivals, and they are able to do it, but they just need a small bit of support from an able-bodied person. And so, like, to all your listeners out there, if you've never heard of Able Vision Ireland, I'd suggest you look up that organisation, because it's a fantastic organisation and I'm delighted to be involved in it. Again, there's another project that I think is very worthy to note. It was set up by Anne Bradshaw, the disability officer for a HSE. It's called the Tipperary Gold Star, and down in Tipperary, all businesses had to kind of make their business as accessible as possible, and if they did, then they got a gold star. And once one business saw that business got a gold star, the next business, they wanted the gold star, because they just wanted to be like that. And then everybody then, soon all these businesses in Tipperary, they were all getting these gold stars. And I suppose what it shows from that project as well is that when one person shows leadership, whether it's through and developing the project and it all filtering down, and then the businesses coming on board, it's about collaboration, it's about, again, empathy, and it's about culture, and it's about businesses all pulling together. So again, that's another project that I tell people to look up if you're interested. I think in terms of disability, it's a good one.
I interviewed a little boy there recently, Paddy O'Callaghan, and his dad, and they do a lot of work now for the Special Olympics. And Paddy has Down syndrome, and he's their only child. And he, quite by accident, he started setting up these podcasts, PAUDCAST. And every Monday he gives a motivational talk. You should check it out. It's a motivational talk from Paddy O'Callaghan. Spectacular. And he's going to hopefully be doing little stuff for us here in the station. But his dad came on with him, and it was a fantastic chat, because he's just an amazing little guy, and trying to motivate people to keep busy during COVID, uh, and giving people a little bit nuggets of advice on how to tidy the garden or tidy the attic or keep busy, and be good at school. And he loved maths, he said, which of course went right over my head, because never liked maths in school.
Same as me.
Oh God, when he said I love maths, I thought, oh sweet God, already you're way ahead of me, Paddy. Just, but what made you decide to go down the route of your running, which is very interesting. And I know that you asked Tommy Tiernan to actually come out running with you, and he said as long as it's away from Bantry, isn't it?
Away from y'all.
Youghal, and not towards Youghal.
Yeah. Well, y'all is a lovely place, so I'd encourage everybody to come down here.
But what does it take for you to actually run?
Well, I suppose I wouldn't have the luxury, and I call it a luxury, of most runners to just put on headphones and go outside, listen to music and go off running, because I can't listen to music while off running. Again, there's only certain areas like that I could run, like so majority of my training is always done on a treadmill, or I'm with a guide runner. And I suppose, like, I'd love to be able to say to myself, oh, I'm going to go off on a trail run now today, and I'm going to go off up the mountains or something like that. But I don't have that luxury. I don't have the the thing to be able to say, okay, I'm looking at this race abroad and I'm going to enter it, because I suppose I'm dependent on guide runners. So I always then have to make sure, well, is my guide runner free to be going to that race? So my training is impacted a lot by just like being dependent on guide runners. But I suppose I focus on what I am able to do. And so, as I say, a lot done on the treadmill or with my guide runner. And I suppose if you're always wondering, what if, then you'd be driving yourself insane a lot. So when I'm out running with my guide runners, it's very much, we have a tether, and that will be between us. And then he'd be saying left, right, ramp in 3, 3, 2, 1 ramp. We'd be in the middle of a conversation, and then all of a sudden he'd switch and he'd say branch. And like, I suppose that's where you always have to be switched on. And my kind of form, my distance of running is ultra running. So that's any distance beyond marathon. And I suppose like 50K, 100K, 12-hour racing and 24-hour racing. So like when you're trying to run a 24
I'm in pain even listening. I need to get fit again. I really do. I admire you so much. I physically couldn't do that now, and I spend my life as a dancer. So I was very fit, but I am so not fit now. I'm fat.
Actually, I was in Irish dancing when I was smaller, and the Irish dancer teacher told my parents that I was able to kick my legs up very, very high, and that I'd be a very good dancer if I continued with it. But I never continued with it.
How did you go to?
It was in Youghal, Canary.
Canary. Okay. Probably I'd never heard of them, but yeah. So yeah, it's amazing. But it goes to prove that the arts is something that is so and should be so inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be having a special needs play or a special needs drama class. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to be an actor or to be a dancer, or you just have to have a talent. And talent is across the board. I mean, I've seen the most amazingly talented people. I mean, I look at Paddy, and I just think the boy oozes with talent.
Mm-hmm.
And 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 I don't see why there aren't more people with special needs, or people who are maybe Down syndrome, or have intellectual disabilities, who aren't in the cinema. There are a few, but I don't think there's enough.
Well, all throughout my life, I have been advocating for rights of people with disabilities. In 2008, I was advocating to get a piece of legislation implemented, which I did get implemented, so that allows solicitors with disabilities assistance in court, such as having a personal reader if needs be. So I got that section of legislation implemented. That's the Civil Miscellaneous Provisions Act 2008. So that was back then. And then in 2012, yeah, it was 2012 or 2013, actually 2013, I think it was, I was kind of looking around, and if you don't see it, then you kind of say to yourself, well, you can't be it. So I was wondering, like, how come there's so few women in politics with disabilities? So I approached different people about it, and I approached different organizations, and nobody was fully on board wanting to discuss this issue. And I suppose I just kept on, and then got people involved, and I organised a conference, and I actually travelled to the UK. I met David Blunkett, and I asked him would he come over to Ireland to be part of the conference, to give his knowledge and insight into being in politics. And I suppose that was back in 2012. And has much changed since the conference I've organised? Do I still see women with disabilities in politics in Ireland? No, I don't. So was that conference a fail? I suppose it comes down to how you look at it, because I suppose even though things haven't changed, I still am actively trying to advocate for people's rights, people with disabilities rights. So, and I will always question the status quo. And I suppose I can't do every single sector. I can't do sports, I can't do politics, I can't do business, I can't do law, I can't do everything. So I suppose as I go on through my journey of life, and the different stages and the different transitions I'm going through,
you'll have covered everything.
I make sure to question, and like I will, I when I meet different people, people ask me would I ever go into politics, and I suppose I would never say no to it, and that's why I have researched it, and had organised a conference on it. Like, my latest challenge in the status quo was in 2019, when I was refused, when I was told that I wasn't allowed to compete at the 24-hour World Championships for ultra running, because I was told that my guide runner was breaching an IAAF route. Now, the thing about this was that this was the first time a person with a vision impairment was competing at the World Championship 24-hour race. And they were saying to me that I couldn't use Guide Runner because it was deemed outside assistance. So therefore I wasn't being selected by Athletics Ireland, because the IAU, International Association of Ultra Running, basically kept saying that I wasn't allowed to use a Guide Runner. And if I did, my results wouldn't be counted. And like, for me, like, it was just so heartbreaking, because I'd invested so much time, money and effort and sacrifices. I had made so many sacrifices in the years previous to be trying to get on this Irish team. And for me, like, I wanted to prove to people that just because you have a disability doesn't mean that you can't achieve. And I suppose what I was looking forward to was having my name on the list with other girls, and not being able to distinguish on that list, oh, Sinead has a disability, because I would have been deemed, because I was the only person in this World Championship with a disability, but having me selected and on the list, you would not know on because it's a list of girls.
Sinead, you wouldn't know to even look at you.
But
That
like, I suppose I just wanted people to recognize my ability rather than my disability. But then I wasn't selected, and the whole thing that I was striving for not to be about my disability, it actually all became about my disability. And I was getting interviews from France and from the BBC and from here in Ireland, and I had to take a legal case, and I ended up winning that legal case where the court in Monaco said that basically I'd been discriminated against under Article 14 of the European Convention of Human Rights. And that case was very stressful for me. It brought me to a very low point in my life, and it was only the team around me who helped me, because at that point I kind of said, okay, well, is there any point me running anymore? Am I going to come up against this challenge again if I get the required standard, which I did? If I get the required standard, am I going to be stopped again by the IAU, International Association of Ultra Run, telling me that, oh no, you can't compete because you can't have a guide runner? And I suppose now that I took the case,
guide runner was going to make you run faster.
Yeah, well, they were saying that it was breaching an IAF rule that no athlete is allowed outside assistance. So, yeah, so like it was a difficult process, and just, yeah, it's hard when you're constantly battling and fighting and enduring prejudice each day. And I suppose that's why I do a lot of motivational speaking. I talk for national companies, I talk for international companies, and I talk about mindset and resilience and teamwork. And really, I couldn't choose how I was born, but I can choose how I live my life, and I choose to live it in a productive, meaningful way. That doesn't mean that I don't have bad days. I have so many bad days. And I suppose sometimes in the bad days, you do need to let yourself just go through it. But for me, like, you have to be disciplined with yourself. My PhD and my running has helped me with that skill of being disciplined. So if I am going through a bad day, I'll say to myself, okay, I'll allow myself go through this emotion, and I'll allow myself go through anger and upset and sadness. And I'll just let myself go through all those emotions, because they are human emotions, and I'll go through them today. But tomorrow, like, cop yourself on and get back working and striving for your goals, because you have to hold yourself accountable, because no matter how much I feel sorry for myself, the world will keep moving. And so therefore, you have to make yourself accountable and self-responsibility.
I was interested in something I read about you when you said you didn't like Tommy Tiernan at one stage, and for the same reasons as I did. I mean, I love Tommy's show. I love his program. I think is phenomenal. I think he's the best broadcaster on RTE. But his comedy, I used to find, some of it wasn't. I used to find wasn't funny. And you took at one stage, you said you took umbrage to the fact that he used to make fun of disability and that, or he used to make jokes about disability. But then you came to understand that, in a sense, not everyone who's disabled would find his jokes not funny. Some would find them funny, and that in some kind of a way, it was bringing disability to the fore. The comedy had a way of, even as politically incorrect as it might be, that it did in some way bring and focus a spotlight on disability that was otherwise maybe pushed into the background. Do you agree?
Well, I think as well, it comes down to how do you see the world. And if you only see the world through the lens of the class of people that you're surrounded with, then that's how your worldview will be. Whereas even if you don't like a person, I think sometimes if you surround yourself with that person, not on a daily basis or anything, but like if you be in their company for whether it's a few moments or whether it's a few hours or whatever, by being across from your opposite, then you learn from them, they learn from you. Two ye could still walk away and the two ye could still hate one another or still not agree, but at least you're trying to educate each other about why you have that world view. And I think as well that like I wouldn't be deemed the typical solicitor because I come from a family of where nobody was involved in law. I come from a situation of having a different disability, different odds are stacked against me. And when I went into my law class in 2001, like the first day, I just went in and I kind of said to myself, okay, there's nobody here that looks like me. And then as the few weeks progressed, other people with disabilities came into law. I remember there was 3 people in my first year, all in wheelchairs. And so that obviously was good to see that there was visible disability. But I suppose, like I remember on the first day of law, the people who I was sitting beside, the girl sitting beside me, I said to her, oh, why did you decide to study law? And she said to me, oh, well, because my parents are both solicitors. And the person at the other side of me said that her father was a judge. Or and like I suppose that was quite intimidating for me then, because knowing that I didn't come from a family background of law, like I told my careers advisor teacher at 17 I wanted to study law, and she told me, well, law is a reading based subject, you'll never be able for it. And that careers advisor teacher fully believed that, and I suppose that was difficult. And I went on then, and in second year law, I was finding it quite difficult. The pre-printing books and everything like that was very small. And looking at the legal profession, there was nobody in the legal, like I saw 1 or 2 barristers who were blind. But for me, in the solicitor profession, I didn't see any people who were blind or visually impaired. And I suppose then if you don't see it, then you believe that you can't be it. And I suppose I ended up going to London. I met a group of people with group of lawyers who have disabilities. And I kind of found that, I suppose, one, like, it was amazing to see that in actual London, there was actually a full group of lawyers with disabilities. And then if I tried to form a group here in Ireland, it would just be me in the solicitors. So I met a judge in London who was totally blind. He became a role model to me, and that boosted my self-esteem. After second year law, and I went on and I got my law degree, I did my master's, and I qualified as a solicitor in 2009. And I suppose after that, when I did my master's in law, I always said I'm never ever doing a PhD. And the learning out of that is never say never, because then I ended up doing a PhD, was it like 10 years later. And so you just, like, for me, like the wheel, like the circle coming full circle. Like I never knew that, okay, with a disability or with my bullying in primary school, that would actually lead me on then to doing a PhD. That would be one of the motives to help me do a PhD later on in life. I never knew that as a child with a disability, never involved in sport, was then able to get to represent her country in the Irish running singlet, despite everybody telling me, oh, like, it's very hard to be doing ultra running. And like, I remember when I did my first 12-hour ultra run, or race, track race, I was the only person in that 12-hour race with a disability. And a lot of the competitors were looking at me, oh, sure, God love us, look at the poor blind girl. And I suppose I wanted to talk back to these people and say, well, I'm not the poor blind girl, I'm your competitor, and I'm going to show you that I'm your competitor. But I didn't say that to them at the beginning of the race, because I said to myself, okay, leave that energy inside you and use that energy and that pain, use that pain as fuel for your journey. And so I did use that pain and energy, and I ended up coming second female in that race, and I broke the track record. And I used that action to show people. And I suppose that's sometimes let your
Sinead,
action.
it takes a special type of a person to overcome exclusion, overcome bullying, overcome visual impaired lifestyle, to actually take on a job or a career that is, as you said, book based. But at the same time, the fact that you were reliant so much on or that you couldn't rely at all, if you like, on being able to read all the time, because some of the books, as you said, the texts were very, very small. So you weren't always guaranteed you were going to be able to read certain books. But it also strengthened, I would imagine, your memory and your ability to remember all the laws that you had to remember. So at will, I would imagine that, and I've heard you mentioning a few laws there earlier on, just rhyming them off. And I would imagine that you're the type of person now that can at will just bring up a law and
well, I'm not quite sure about that. Like, I suppose I have to work hard at it. I suppose even with the running, I'm not naturally talented at the running. I have to put in the hard work. I have to make a lot of sacrifices with it. And I suppose even in college, like, I had to make a lot of sacrifices. So example, like, because my eyes would get sore quite easily, there was many nights where all the students and all the people in the class were going out, and I didn't bother going out because I'd spread out my reading. I would do half of it in the morning and half of it in the evening, to give my eyes a break and all of that. And I suppose it comes down to how badly do you want your goals, how like what adaptability, what's your mindset. Like, I grew up in a house where things had to be organized so that we didn't fall over things, and that was us being adaptable. And when you have a disability, planning is essential, especially if you're using a lot of public transport. So I learned from a very young age planning and organization was essential. When at age 8, I was surrounded by many adults up in Deel, looking at adults talking about people with disabilities and their rights. My disability has meant that I've had to grow up a lot faster than, I suppose, maybe another normal child. So I think when you're around that type of thing of adaptability and planning and organization, and when you kind of learn those skills, it helps you, as opposed to having a really 100% memory. Because, as I say, I have to work hard at my running and at my academia.
I was interested in a quote that you said, where you said that the beauty of being vulnerable and experience adversity is it allows you to grow, it allows you to see more, it allows you to appreciate the light when you're in the dark.
Yeah, I suppose that, like, when you are in the light or when you are in the dark, that you just have to look for some tiny bit of hope, even if it's extremely hard to have it. Like, if you can try and cling on to some bit of a hope, that can get you through. And I suppose that is what I do. Like, I suppose, like, I prefer all running and preparing for races, but there's no guarantee going into the race that I will succeed. I suppose you just have to have that hope that you will. I suppose I make all these sacrifices in terms of preparing for different running events. Again, even if I get a standard, if 20 people go in for the same event and there's only 5 slots, then again, I have to have that hope that I'll be selected. Because if you kept telling yourself, oh, well, there's no point in this, there's 19 other people out there trying to do the same thing, you're not going to be selected, then you won't go out the door running.
It's interesting you say that about hope, because in my research, I found out from interviewing all of the survivors I've interviewed, and I continue to interview survivors, children of survivors, and those working in Holocaust and genocide studies. And the one thing that they clung to all the time, no matter how bad life got, no matter how hungry they were in the camps, no matter how many of their families were dying around them, was hope. As I said, you could live without faith and you could live without food, but you couldn't live without hope, because it's that keeps you going, that keeps you clinging on to the fact that the potential that life is going to be better.
Like even there, when you're talking about hope, like I would say, be interested, I suppose maybe from the law perspective as well, like different crime cases, etc. And I remember reading the book of J.C. Lee Dugard. It was a girl in America who had been kidnapped and held captive for, was it 20 years, and she was in a shed and everything like that. And she said that in her book that the one thing that was keeping her going, that before she was captured, was that herself and her mother used to sit on the porch together and look up at the moon together. And when she was held captive, when she was in this shed, she could see out a window, and she always had that hope that even though she wasn't sitting beside her mother, by looking at the moon, that she's looking at the moon and that her mother be looking at the moon, so that she had that hope someday that they'd be back looking at it together. So I suppose again that comes back to that hope element.
Yeah, it's the only thing that actually gets you through. Otherwise, you'd just crumble up and say, "What's the purpose of life?" You have to believe that it's bad today, but it's going to be better tomorrow. Or, and as you said, keep yourself occupied. Find something to do. Find something to motivate you. That'll get you through that dark stage in your life.
And I think as well, like I give a lot of talks in schools as well to people with disabilities and students without disabilities, and like people with, like I wouldn't lie to people, students, like people with disabilities, when they apply for jobs, they do get rejected. I've experienced so many rejections, but again, if you kind of said to yourself, okay, well, what's the point then you're kind of missing out on the whole process of the journey. Because like, say if somebody said to me, okay, you want to achieve X running goal, and I'll just give it to you just like this, and you can be at the finish, but then you don't actually learn about yourself, about your strength of character, going out running in the rain for 4 hours in lashing rain. You don't learn about, okay, well, I had character today.
You're insane. I just want to tell you, you're insane. Anyone who go out and run for 4 hours in the rain is insane.
Yeah. Well, I suppose like the point being is that the process you go, if you were handed your goals, like, do you just take them? And the temptation is to just take them, but you don't learn about yourself. I suppose through learning, through doing my running and my academia, I've learned a lot about myself. Like even going through college, just I had different experiences, and I wouldn't have had those if I had been just handed the degree without any of the work. So I suppose I want to let all the students know out there that to go to college if you are finding it difficult. There's different programs out there, like there's the DARE program, and then there's the DARE and the HARE, HARE, DARE, Disability Access Route Education, and then Higher Access Route Education. And from my knowledge, I think the DARE released a report back December 2020 where stating that about 11,300 people were going through college through the DARE and HARE. And I think Minister Simon Harris in January of this year, 2021, he had said it was about 13,000. So you can take it, it's in and around 13,000 that's accessing the colleges, and that there has been, apparently, according to DARE, an increase of 2% of people uptaking places through college. And for anybody who doesn't know what DARE is, it's creating inclusive environments in college for people to access college. So you might not have got all your CAO points, and so therefore you can get into your course through not having all your CAO points through the DARE system. So I would encourage your listeners, if they were thinking about going to college, to maybe even look up any of those programs.
Well, Sinead, it's been an absolute privilege chatting to you. Sometimes in your life you come across people who are truly inspirational, and I mean the word is thrown around quite a lot, but not always in the right direction. But it's certainly in the right direction when it's pointed at you. I mean, you're somebody who has just lived your dreams and lived them through adversity, and come out the other side.
Well, I suppose I choose to be visionary, not blind. Not every day is easy, but I just get back up. And how badly do you want your goals? That's what I tell myself every day, and it's important to keep learning. I always reflect on that I don't know everything. I always reflect on what choices am I going to make, because I do have choices, and that I should be grateful for having choices, and to embrace opportunities and embrace experiences. And finally, to just realize that none of us do life by ourselves, and that we all need a good supportive team around us. Like, I have the 2 Guinness World Records for doing furthest distance for any female on a treadmill in 12 hours, which is 130.5 kilometers. And I wouldn't have achieved that if it wasn't for the team around me. And then the other Guinness World Record was the 7 marathons, 7 continents within 7 days, which 6 days, 9 hours to be exact. So I went to Antarctica, Chile, Miami, Madrid, Marrakesh, Dubai, and Sydney. So I would not have achieved those things if it wasn't for the people in my life, supporting me academically and in my sport.
How can anybody take 7 marathons in 7 days? How can any human body physically get up in the morning after one marathon? After even running for 10 minutes, I'm exhausted.
You'd be surprised, I think, like that, when you it's all the self-talk that goes on in your head. And as well, like even say with COVID, like when COVID first started, I was panicking about, maybe doing online talks or online, and now it's just the norm. And I nearly prefer doing online lectures. I teach a bit with disability studies module at the UCC Adult Education, and for me, I've actually enjoyed doing it that way. And at the beginning, I just hated the thought of it. So I think whether it's 7 marathons, 7 continents, 7 days, or whether it's lecturing online, I think you come adaptable to it and you get into a routine. So with me, with the marathons, had there been an 8 marathon, I would have done it because that was just my routine every day.
Jeez, Sinead, you are just breathtakingly inspirational. And I thank you for being a guest on my show today. The time flew.
Thanks very much for having me.
It was Shindera Leshon Clare. That's the end of the show today. Until the next time, Lacuna Day. Bawallam Tugaler, Chiacana, Sonazak Gra. I wish you peace, happiness, and love. And I thank my very special guest today, Guinness World Record holder, Dr. Sinéad Kane, and solicitor also. Good day, Shiv Sloan.
Thanks very much. Thanks.